ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Have you had a friend cancel on you at the last moment? Well, that's what Simon Patterson did to his wife, and she was disappointed. I'm the ABC's court reporter, Kristian Silva.
And I'm Stephen Stockwell. It is Thursday, the 2nd of May, and we've just finished the second day of this trial. You're listening to Mushroom Case Daily.
The small-town mystery that's gripped the nation and made headlines around the world.
On the menu was beef Wellington.
3 people are dead and 1 man is fighting for his life this morning after a suspected mushroom poisoning.
But Erin Patterson has strongly maintained her innocence.
It's a tragedy what's happened. I love them.
We're really starting to get rolling in the trial of Erin Patterson now. Kristian, before we get into the conversation today, are you able to give us the headlines, just a sort of 60-second wrap to bring us up to speed on what happened in court today?
The first witness in this trial took the stand, and it was Erin Patterson's estranged husband, Simon Patterson. Simon took us through the history of their relationship and, crucially, that period just before and after the fatal lunch. We also heard about various disputes that Simon and Erin had over things like property and their kids' schools. And also there were some pretty emotional moments for Simon Patterson as he described the anguish and pain that his parents felt after they fell really sick.
It was a really revealing day in court today, Kristian, and I want to start by talking a bit about Simon Patterson being in the room. He's the first witness that we've seen called in this trial so far. He's Erin Patterson's estranged husband. What was it like with him in the room? Because Erin's in the room as well. Was it tense? Were they looking at each other? What was happening?
There was definitely an air of anticipation for this particular witness. A lot of media outside court getting snaps of him as he came in. But Simon Patterson had an air of confidence when he walked into the courtroom and took his seat in the witness box. He was dressed in a suit and a tie. Initially, he was asked some really basic things to confirm his name. And also he did confirm that he and Erin Patterson are actually still married.
Right. And this is something I want to get into a little bit, right? Because we keep saying estranged when it comes to Simon and Erin. Why is that? So they're not divorced, they're still married, but they're separated. What did we learn about that?
They're definitely still separated. So their relationship goes back about 25 years. And Simon said they met while working at the Monash Council, which is a council area in suburban Melbourne. He said that he was an engineer and Erin worked in the local laws department. Their relationship blossomed. They got married in about 2007. And to cut a long story short, the relationship really started to decline by about 2015. And he said that they remained on friendly terms. However, a couple of years before the lunch, things declined even further.
When you say declined even further, I mean, it doesn't sound, they're not divorced, but it does sound a little bit kind of like a breakup, I guess. Who's splitting up with who? Who's pulling away from who here?
The way that Simon told it, he made it really sound as if he wanted to keep the relationship going. At that time, it sounded like he still had hope that the two of them could stay together. And also they have 2 children, and I'm sure for the sake of the kids, he's a religious man too, so maybe that was a factor as well. Simon made it clear that every time they split up, it was usually because she was the one who intended to leave. And he said that around 2019, that was when she really made their separation more permanent.
Yeah, right. And what happened in between, let's say, 2019 and the lunch in 2023? What was going on in that? What sort of splits or tensions were occurring in that period?
They were living in that Korumburra, Leongatha area, moving between various houses. They were sharing custody of their children. But Simon said that the relationship really declined. There was one particular trigger point, it sounded like, and it was when he lodged his tax return, of all things. And on the tax return, he's listed himself as separated. And apparently that had some sort of tax implications for Erin, and she wasn't really thrilled about that. And then there was also tension when Erin changed the kids' schooling without telling Simon.
The reason we're making this podcast, the reason we're in Morwell covering this trial is because of the lunch that Erin held in late July 2023. Simon wasn't at that lunch, but you've alluded in the intro of this podcast that it was a pretty late withdrawal. What happened there?
From Simon's perspective, this lunch came together a couple of weeks earlier when everyone was at church. Keep in mind, this is a church-going family. And Simon said that Erin approached Don and Gail Patterson and Heather and Ian Wilkinson, as well as himself, about popping over for lunch in a couple of weeks' time. And she told them that she had some important health issues to discuss. Now, if you remember back to our episode yesterday, we talked about this false cancer claim that Erin Patterson had made. So it was clearly about that.
Mm-hmm.
And Simon said he initially agreed to come along. 2 weeks pass, and the night before, he bails out. And not only does he bail out, he does it via text, which is never the best way to cancel on somebody, and she wasn't too impressed.
Right. What did he say? Do we know what was sent to the text messages?
Well, their text messages were shown to the court. They've been tendered as evidence, and I'll read them out. So Simon said, "I feel too uncomfortable about coming to the lunch with you, Mum, Dad, Heather and Ian tomorrow, but I'm happy to talk about your health and implications of that at another time. If you'd like to discuss on the phone, just let me know." She shot a reply back, and that read, "That's really disappointing. Ooh. I've spent many hours this week preparing lunch for tomorrow, which has been exhausting in light of the issues I'm facing, and spent a small fortune on beef eye fillet to make beef Wellingtons because I wanted it to be a special meal, as I may not be able to host a lunch like this again for some time. It's important to me that you're all there tomorrow and that I can have the conversations that I need to have. I hope you'll change your mind. Your parents and Heather and Ian are coming at 12:30. I hope to see you there."
Did he reply to that message?
No, and he didn't rock up, but the others did.
Yeah. That "I hope to see you there" at the end is, that's it. I can feel that in the message coming through. So Simon doesn't go to this lunch. We know he's not in attendance at that. When does he kind of next hear about it?
Simon said that he didn't talk to anyone about the lunch. He popped over that day to drop some kids off, but he didn't go inside. He didn't say hello to anyone. And the first he sort of realised that something bad had happened was the next morning when he spoke to his parents and they were quite sick. And then he also went over to the Wilkinsons' house and realised they were really sick too, and he was encouraging them to go to hospital.
Yeah, what did they say when he got to the house?
So he spoke to Heather Wilkinson, who brought up the lunch and started asking him some questions. She brought up this different coloured plate that Erin used. And remember yesterday we said that the other guests ate off grey plates. Erin had this orange plate. So Simon said that Heather asked him, "Is Erin short on crockery? Is that why she would have this different kind of coloured plate?" And so to sort of explain that, Simon replied and said, yes, she doesn't have that many plates, and that might be the reason. This topic of the plates came up later on in the day as well when Erin Patterson's defence barrister Colin Mandy was cross-examining Simon Patterson, and Simon conceded that Erin had a bunch of mismatched plate sets. But one thing he said, which was pretty interesting, was he said that one plate in particular really stood out, and that was this colourful plastic plate, which was created by their daughter. And he said he actually has a similar version at his house too. So he was presuming that that is the plate that Erin Patterson ate off at the lunch.
Yeah. At this point of the story, we've got the people who went to the lunch in hospital. He's taken his aunt and his uncle, Heather and Ian Wilkinson, to hospital. Does he see his parents, Gail and Don, at any point?
Yeah, well, he goes to check on them too. And this was a pretty emotional part of his evidence. Simon Patterson is an engineer by trade, and he's a pretty methodical kind of guy. He gives sometimes a lot of thought before he answers his questions. But when he was talking about his dying father, suffering in hospital, he was really emotional. I think he was pretty close to tears. I could see him in the witness box, and only a few meters away from me. He was describing how his father was suffering and struggling even just to talk because he was in so much pain. But in their discussion, the father, Don Patterson, brought up this cancer claim that Erin Patterson had made. And to Simon, that was the first that he'd heard of it.
Wow. And does he talk to Erin at all after the lunch?
They do get in conversation. He and Erin Patterson exchange some phone calls, and she tells him that she's also sick, but clearly not to the extent of the others.
Does he, suggest that she should go to hospital at this point?
Yeah, so he suggested that she should get to hospital either via an ambulance or to drive there herself. According to him, she was pretty reluctant to drive herself. She was apparently having regular diarrhea and didn't want to have an accident while driving the car.
Yeah, right. We also had our first cross-examination in the courtroom today. And so this is Colin Mandy SC, who's representing Erin's defence. He was asking Simon some questions about all of this. And yeah, cross-examination, that's the right term I'm using there, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. What was he going into? What was he asking about?
He was going into a lot of topics. I think one of the key topics that he touched on was Erin Patterson's relationship with her extended family. Keep in mind, this is a 25-year marriage, and Simon Patterson conceded that because Erin had received quite a large inheritance from her grandmother and then later on her mother, that she used a lot of that money, gave out a lot of loans to the Patterson family for Simon and his siblings to buy their own homes. And these were interest-free loans, and it was of great benefit to the Patterson family. Colin Mandy also asked whether Erin Patterson loved her children, and Simon said yes, she was a loving mother. Then Colin Mandy asked whether Erin Patterson loved Don and Gail. And Simon said she seemed to, yeah. And it kind of was left hanging at that moment.
Is that an interesting exchange?
I guess you can make of it what you will.
Yeah.
And the jury will, no doubt.
Yeah, of course. Talking about, Erin and the way she was, very generous with her money, were there disagreements around the property? If the relationship's not going well, did that get awkward?
The way Simon tells it, even though they were separated for a number of years, they were on fairly friendly terms for a while. But then when things started to go downhill around, 2019, 2020, 2021, there was some bickering and arguments over money. And that was, part of the general malaise, if you can say, between those two.
Were there conversations as well around like the kids that Colin Mandy SC was getting into, talking about the care of them or the child support payments that Simon would have been making or like where they were going to school, things like that?
Yeah, there were various child sharing agreements that they had. And the court was told that Simon Patterson was paying about $40 a month in child support payments, obviously not a lot. And that was reassessed about how much he should pay into the future. But clearly there was tension between the two around school fees.
Did the questioning that Colin Mandy SC was kind of going to with Simon give us any sort of alternate explanation for this being a terrible accident or how he might, look to defend Erin Patterson?
Not in terms of the specific things that Erin Patterson did relating to preparing the meal, but remember back to yesterday when Colin Mandy said this was all a terrible accident and she had no intention of harming these people. So what he's getting at, I think, is that she loved these people. Look at what she's done. She's given massive loans. She's staying in touch with her estranged husband's family. This is not something that people do if they hate that entire side.
Yep.
So I think that's what he's getting at there, and he's trying to build on this argument that he's making that it's all a giant accident. And there were some specific examples that Mr. Mandy went to, and he talked about what sounded like a real bond that Erin Patterson had with her father-in-law. And Simon acknowledged this, a shared love of science, of books, of learning, of conversation. These two had a connection, it sounds like. And a couple of weeks before the fatal lunch, Mr. Mandy reminded Simon about a backyard experiment that Don Patterson had undertaken with his grandson, where the two of them tried unsuccessfully to build a rocket-powered car. And this got a few smiles in the courtroom, even from Simon himself. Erin also cracked a smile, which she hasn't really done over the last couple of days. And Simon said, well, yes, that is something that my dad would do. He loved rockets. So it was, again, a rare moment of warmth in what is such a serious and horrific case.
Yeah, that's very sweet. It's a nice story. Before we wrap up today's episode, Kristian, we've had a lot of questions coming in on the email, mushroomcasedaily@abc.net.au. Again, another avalanche overnight as people are getting in touch. Seeing we're talking about Simon, we have had a lot about the attempted murder charges relating to him that have been dropped. Nick, Kelly, Lawrence, thank you for getting in touch. I know we explained in our episode on Tuesday that the judge has told the jury that they've been dropped. They should put them out of their mind. Is there anything more that we can say around that, though?
Those were not discussed during his evidence today.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Kristian. If you do have an email as well, please get in touch, mushroomcasedaily@abc.net.au. We're going to be wrapping up the week in our episode tomorrow. We're going to be getting to a heap of your questions in that episode. So please get in touch if you have anything you'd like us to talk about. Also, please jump onto the ABC Listen app and follow Mushroom Case Daily so you don't miss an episode, as we're bringing you daily updates in the trial of Erin Patterson.
So Simon Patterson's evidence continues tomorrow. Tomorrow is only a half day at court, so whether there's anyone else after him, we'll just have to wait and see. Mushroom Case Daily is produced by ABC Audio Studios and ABC News. It's presented by me, court reporter Kristian Silva, and producer Stephen Stockwell.
Our executive producer is Claire Rawlinson. Props to Kristian's boss, Sarah Jench, Audio Studios manager, Eric George, and our true crime colleagues, Tim Roxburgh, Rachel Brown, and Yasmin Parry, for helping make this show a reality. This episode was produced on the land of the Gunai-Kurnai people.
You've been listening to an ABC podcast. Discover more great ABC podcasts, live radio, and exclusives on the ABC Listen app.